Welcome to GHS, the Global Harmonization System. Part 1. What is GHS and how does it compare to current OSHA HCS? This training session is designed to provide information to employees who work with hazardous chemicals and substances.
This part's agenda will include
What is GHS? Compliance dates, current hazmat programs, and training requirements.
So what is GHS?
GHS is the globally harmonized system for hazard classification and labeling. It's a common and coherent approach to classify chemicals for a global economy, specifically defines and classifies hazards for chemical substances, dilute solutions, and mixtures, communicates information on labels and safety data sheets known as SDSs. It provides infrastructure for establishment of national and international comprehensive chemical safety programs.
So why is GHS needed?
To eliminate the variation in chemical classifications and hazards, to provide consistency on phrases used to indicate the severity of hazard across different hazard types, to offer better employee protection. Information should be conveyed in more than one way for comprehensibility and understanding, reduces confusion, enhances understanding of hazards, and helps address literacy and language concerns.
So how is GHS putting it all together? They are bringing together the rules and regulations from the Department of Transportation, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, along with the Consumer Product Safety Commission and the EPA's Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act. It also brings into play the European Union and the Canadian regulatory community. And finally, it brings together the New Jersey Right to Know and the Proposition 65 Act from California. So, what are the GHS changes?
The classification criteria, including class and category, health hazards, physical hazards, environmental hazards, mixtures, hazard communication, labels, safety data sheets known as SDSs, and it replaces the material safety data sheets known as MSDSs.
So, what changes are made to HazCom Compliance with GHS?
Labels and their new standards, MSDS to SDS with extensive changes. Added is training on the labels and SDSs. To keep existing HazCom training programs. Add information as it comes into the workplace. As an example, replace the MSDSs with SDSs in your facility's book. Replace labels and MSDS training sections with the new standard. Written program will remain mostly unchanged. Definitions have changed, and you still require reviews and updates. GHS does not replace a facility-specific HazCom program.
Who is affected by these changes?
Manufacturers, distributors, and importers are required to change SDS information and format, change container labeling. Employers are required to train employees on changes to SDS, which is a change from MSDS to SDS, which is now a 16-section format. Container labels, including secondary containers, update HazCom training to the new standards, and update HazCom written plans to the new standards. Employees are required to recognize and understand hazards based on information in the new SDS format, pictograms on container labels, and precautionary and hazard statements.
So what are the effective dates and requirements?
By December 1st, 2013, employers shall have all their employees trained on the new label elements and SDS format. By June 1st, 2015, all chemical manufacturers, importers, distributors, and employers shall be compliant with all modified provisions of the final rule except as noted with different effective dates. December 1st, 2015, the distributor shall not ship container labels by the chemical manufacturer or importer unless it is a GHS label. June 1st, 2016, all employers shall, as necessary, update any alternative workplace labeling, update the hazard communication program, and provide any additional employee training for newly identified physical or health hazards.
What are some new definition updates under GHS?
Revised definitions include chemical, chemical name, hazardous chemical, health hazard, label, mixture, physical hazard, and trade secret. New terminology includes hazard classification, hazard category, HNOC, otherwise known as hazard not otherwise classified, hazard statement, label elements, pictogram, precautionary statement, product identifier, pyrophoric gas, safety data sheet, signal word, simple asphyxiant, and substance.
Let's take a look at some new definitions, starting with hazard classification and category. Specific criteria for classifying agents includes health hazards, physical hazards, and environmental hazards, which are not regulated by OSHA. Hazard class indicates the nature of the hazard. Hazard category, the degree of severity within each hazard class, 1 being the most severe and 4 being the less severe.
New health hazard classifications include acute toxicity, skin corrosion and irritation, severe eye damage and eye irritation, respiratory or skin sensitization, germ cell mutagenicity, carcinogenicity, reproductive toxicity. Specific target organ toxicity includes single exposure. Specific target organ toxicity includes repeated exposure. Aspiration toxicity, simple asphyxiants, not part of GHS and OSHA requirement.
Let's look at a chemical classification example under the heading Health Hazards.
This is an example of the manufacturer's hazard categories for each health hazard class. There are detailed appendices within on OSHA's 2012 that they use to determine the hazard category. This chart shows the new health hazard classes and the hazard categories that correspond to each of the health hazard classes. Hazard Category 1, or column furthest to the left, is the most hazardous. Hazardous categories become less severe as you move to the right of the chart. Manufacturers, importers, and raw material distributors must classify all hazards for their products.
Let's look at another chemical classification example, this time under the physical hazards.
Used criteria for transport, DOT for example, as basis for the work since they already harmonized. Each of the chemical physical classifications are further defined and described in Appendix B of the HazCom standard. Appendix B is used by manufacturers, importers, and distributors to determine if any of their products are classified as a physical hazard. If the product is classified as a physical hazard in one or more of the physical hazard classifications, Appendix B is used to determine the severity of the hazard or hazard category.
One more example of a chemical classification is under environmental hazards. Please note that this is not an OSHA requirement, but is regulated by EPA. The criteria include acute aquatic toxicity and chronic aquatic toxicity. Next, we'll look at how the GHS, or 2012 Hazard Communication System under OSHA, versus other existing systems currently being utilized by employers.
Other hazard systems include HMIS, which attempts to convey full health warning information to all employees, not intended for emergency circumstances. The NFPA, primarily for firefighters and other emergency responders, lacks chronic health hazard information because the system is meant only for emergency or acute or short-term exposures. The Department of Defense, or DoD, Hazardous Material Information Resource System, uses hazard characteristic codes to classify materials by their primary hazard characteristic for the safe segregation and storage of hazardous materials. These are 10 basic classifications defined by letters A to Z. Others include facility specific created.
So let's take a look at how GHS compares to HMIS and the NFPA.
Under the GHS HazCom standard, chemical classification is a Category 4 for the least severe and Category 1 in the most severe. This is opposite of NFPA and HMIS, where 4 indicates most severe and 1 the least severe. The GHS hazard category numbers may be noted in the SDS. Hazard category numbers are not required to be present on the container label.
Here's an example of the definition of flammability by various regulatory agencies within the United States. The first one, under the OSHA Hazard Communication System, defines flammability with a flash point of less than 100 degrees and something combustible between 100 and 200 degrees. By comparison, note that DOT considers a flammable liquid with a flash point of less than 140 degrees and being combustible between 140 and 200. Under GHS, there will be 3 different categories. Extremely or highly flammable materials will have a flash point of less than 73 degrees. From 73 to 140, it will be considered just a flammable, and above 140 degrees, it will be considered a combustible.
The differences in the way we currently communicate about the hazards of a chemical are the HMIS NFPA numerical rating. 0 is a minimal hazard down to 4, which is a severe hazard, compared to the GHS hazard category, where Category 1 is a severe hazard and Category 5 is a minimal hazard. Understanding the number information differences. Going back to the GHS nomenclature, the Category 1 is a severe hazard, where Category 5 is a minimal hazard, compared to the HMIS and the NFPA nomenclature, where Category 0 is minimal and Category 4 is severe.
More information on the GHS and the other OSHA standards can be found at the following web pages and guides that are freely available on the internet. There you can find information on regulatory concerns, the final rule of the HazCom HCS, comparisons, frequently asked questions, additional guidance, OSHA briefs, and additional fact sheets.
Summary action plans. Things you or your employer need to do. Train employees on new 2012 HCS labels and SDSs, complete by December 1st, 2013. Update the SDS and labels. Manufacturers must do this by June 1st, 2015. Distributors will sell through until December 1st, 2015. Update your workplace labels, and facility-specific written programs must be completed by June 1st, 2016.